Today on Locked On Blue Jackets, we've got Deana Weinheimer of AHL News Now here to talk all about the Cleveland Monsters, who's going to be making an impact, who could be in the NHL, and what are we most excited about. All that on today's episode.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster. Hayden, once again, is unable to join us this episode due to scheduling issues. He will be back tomorrow, I promise this time. Before we get started, though, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and also on YouTube and also on Sirius XM if you are a radio app kind of person. Let's just get straight into it, shall we? Traverse City happened this weekend. Lots of Cleveland Monsters, lots of potential monsters, lots of Blue Jackets rookies, prospects, everyone there. So I thought, let's take a look at what the Monsters are going to look like this season. Any surprises, any graduates, any new faces that we should be excited about. And I thought the best person to ask about that would be my friend and colleague over at AHL News Now, Deana Weinheimer. So I'm just going to get into my conversation with her because she knows much more than I do. So we thought we spent so much time on the Blue Jackets this season, this off-season even, and there was a lot of monsters on the squad. So I thought, let's try and take a look at what the Cleveland Monsters are going to look like this year, because my prediction is that they're going to be as fun as heck. So I've got the smartest Monsters person I know, Deana Weinheimer, founder of AHL News Now and Cleveland Monsters writer over there, to come and talk to us about some baby jackets and some guys that we could see make the jump to the NHL this season. So, Deana, thank you for hopping on the podcast. As always, it's always fun to have you on. It's always fun to do Monsters talk. So let's start off with who are you the most excited to welcome into the Monsters this season? Is there any new faces that you're like, I can't wait to see him put on a Monsters jersey?
Right now, it is a tie for me. And of course, before I go into this, thank you again for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be here. But I'm going to go for Luca Belluz and James Malatesta. So Luca seems to be making the jump to the Monsters this season. But honestly, James Malatesta, I have had my eye on him since he first started skating in the Traverse City tournaments, I believe 2 seasons ago. So not last season, but the season before. It was my first time at the Traverse City NHL Prospects tournament, and he caught my eye right away. Very physical player, but he can help distribute the puck really well. Yeah, I'm really thinking that in my projection, they're going to be bottom 6, definitely, because there's so many good, I guess by now you can consider them veterans to the Monsters. But, you compare James Malatesta with Roman Ashawn, Josh Dunn. What a line.
That's a fun
line. I mean, quick pace, not afraid to play tough on the forecheck and the back check. Yeah, those two paired with some nice veterans, that's going to be my 2 players to watch.
Yeah, James Malatesta is definitely a guy that we here at Locked On Blue Jackets have had our eye on. Playoff MVP with the QMJHL this season with the Quebec Ramparts, and he doesn't know how to play hockey at anything other than 110%, and that is just the most fun way to play hockey, I think. Luca Belluz, a big fan of as well, but yeah, James Malatesta is definitely someone I am looking at to be maybe have a little bit of a slow start with the Monsters, but fans are going to love him. I think he might be the next Trey Wolansky, which is big shoes to fill, but that's kind of where I'm sitting at right now with him.
honestly, if you're going to have two similar players on a squad, I wouldn't want anyone other than a second Trey Wolansky type player.
I would take a squad of 20 Trey Wolanskis and a goalie, I think. So, but we know this. I
I'm
really like
here
Trey
for it.
Wolansky. Deana is the founder of the Trey Wolansky fan club. And I want to talk about him next, actually. Is he ready to be a full-time NHLer, do you think?
In the right system.
Mm-hmm.
With Trey Wolansky, of course, he has a ton of talent, spark, bit of snarl when needed in the right places. But, and I hate to bring size into it, but you have to pair him with the right people. I'm thinking kind of like a Cam Atkinson type player, only with the extra snarl involved.
Mm-hmm.
And if I say a little bit better of a sniper, I hope I'm not overstepping with that. But of course, we all know about the changes up top with the Blue Jackets coaching. So I don't know how that system, if it's going to change or how that's going to work out. I would love to see him get more time in the NHL with the Blue Jackets because I want him to stay in the Blue Jackets system. However, if he hasn't cracked it by now, I don't know, but I believe in the right system, he could be an NHLer and make a positive impact.
Yeah, it feels like if he hasn't earned it by now, then when? It's just the Blue Jackets they have such a logjam of NHL players that it's going to be tough for him to get a look in, but I'm looking for him to have a really strong camp. Obviously, Pascal Vincent is very familiar with him. He's been, up and down the last couple of years, and I think at this point, if nothing else, he's earned a good long look at the NHL side of things. I know Monsters fans don't want to hear that. They'd love to keep him around forever, but I would love to see Trey Wolansky as a full-time NHLer, and I think at this point he's earned it. He was almost too good for the Monsters last season.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if it feels like if he gets his chance and he gets, give him 10, 15 games in the NHL, I don't think you'll be sending him back down. Is there anyone else from the Monsters that you think could kind of burst onto the scene this year? Any kind of unexpected call-ups that you think once they get into the NHL, that's it, we're not getting them back? Similar to obviously Marcus Bjork, you lost for most of the season. Tim Burney finished the season with the Blue Jackets, and Kirill Marchenko, once he got his chance in the NHL, obviously it was game over for his AHL career. Is there anyone on the team that you think could be a similar type player if they get their NHL shot and they just take off?
The one that's screaming out to me right now is David Jiricek. Other than the fact that he is waivers exempt, that would probably be the one reason why they wouldn't keep him up. But he, again, similar to a Trey Wolansky, he was at times almost too good for the AHL and the Monsters last season. Other than that, I'm not getting the vibe from anyone that's going to be a lock to do that, but I wouldn't be surprised if, say Carson Meyer again, he just over the summer signed a 1-year, 2-way deal. He's a dynamic player again. And my top projected line of Owen Sillinger, Tyler Angle, Trey Wolansky. Honestly, I can see that line getting shaky, broken up with maybe Trey Wolansky coming up. And then that second line, I had Meyer on the right wing. If those two go up, man, my top 6 is just a mess. But also, we need to remember Brendan Gaunce. He was out basically all of last season with an injury. He's coming back now. I don't know where he's going to slot into any of this.
Right. And you guys are probably going to pick up wild card. Hunter McCown. I don't think he's going to be in the... And I liked his game a lot in the NHL last season, so you'll probably pick him up to get a little bit more seasoning in the pro leagues. But This is the thing. I keep looking at like the top 12 or the best 13 forwards for the Blue Jackets. And then I'm like, right, well, I guess everyone else to the Monsters. And then I look at the Monsters and I'm like, oh, how do I move all of these guys down in the lineup? You know, guys like Owen Sillinger, who I like his game a lot. Guys like Tyler Angle. Guys like Josh Dunn, who I think still has something left to give at the NHL level. So it's in a minute, we have got more conversation with Deana all about the Monsters. But first, I've got to tell you guys all about FanDuel. Snap into action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And all you have to do is place a $5 bet. Whether you win or lose that $5 bet, doesn't matter. You're still going to get those $200 in bonus bets. You can use those on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You could use them on baseball, basketball, which is back soon, hockey, which is also back soon. Very exciting. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is safe, secure, super easy to use. You get paid immediately. You don't have to wait around to get your deposits back. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL, and also us, the Locked On Podcast Network. Having too many players that are too good for where they're playing is a good problem to have, but also it's going to make for some frustrating lineup decisions, especially at the blue line, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. I want to talk to you about a player that we didn't expect to see with the Monsters this season. Cole Sillinger struggled a lot in the NHL this season, went down to the AHL, I think started to kind of get a little bit of his mojo back. Do you think he should be, like, is he close to going back to the NHL, do you think? Or should he be spending more time in Cleveland? He's got his brother there. He's got a little bit less pressure there. What do you think is best for Cole Sillinger's development at this point?
Honestly, I think I could answer that question a little bit better after I see some of training camp to see where his mindset is, where his conditioning is. The nice thing about Cole Sillinger is basically exactly as you said. Cleveland would be a very friendly environment for him. They have a second-year coach there in Trent Vogelhuber, of course, former professional player that is definitely a player's coach. However, he is open and honest with the players and does not mince words. If that is not a huge key piece for development, I don't know what is. But I just can't say what would be best. At this point, if he's on the bubble, send him down. Don't just keep him up, in Columbus
Put him in
just
the
to
press
have him
box every other
around.
game, yeah.
Right. Or on the fourth line playing minimal minutes. If you're, as the Blue Jackets coaching staff, if you are unsure, just send him down. Give him top minutes with Trey Wolansky and that crew. That's a little bit more versed in the life of Blue Jackets style hockey. Right. And of course, in the system, just let him go.
Yeah, let him get a little bit of his swagger back.
Absolutely.
I think his confidence took a real knock last season when he stopped scoring and then his ice time started dropping. And play him 20 minutes in the AHL instead of 8 minutes in the NHL. Which I think was one of the most frustrating things about Brad Larson last season for me was once someone was out of his favor, it was very, very difficult for them to get back in the lineup. And Cole Sillinger suffered with that, I think. I want to talk about defensemen because the Blue Jackets have too many defensemen. And so do the Monsters. I know we talked about this a little bit off mic a while ago of trying to guess who the top 6 defensemen are going to be for the Monsters this season. And then, that's with the assumption that they don't keep David Jiricek and that Nick Blankenburg makes the NHL roster and doesn't get sent down. But I think we could very likely see a top pairing in the AHL of David Jiricek and Nick Blankenburg. Stanislav Svozil is coming over. Corsten Kuhlman's came over at the end of the season. Then you've got your longtime Monsters. What is happening with the defense? How is this going to shake out?
So you talked about the Jackets having a lot of people. The Cleveland Monsters, if you consider or include Nick Blankenburg, have 10 eligible players to play on defense. Mm-hmm. And that does not include everyone's favorite defenseman, sometimes forward, and Dylan Simpson, that retired over the summer and has now taken up a assistant coaching position in the college ranks. So here's how I see it. Now, of course, like you said, we talked offline about this. So you kind of help me form my defensive core here, but I'm of the same assumption that Nick Blankenburg will be potentially sent down to the AHL. So that means we would have Blankenburg and Jiricek on the top line, Jake Christensen, Cole Clayton, Carson Ceulemans, and my personal favorite defenseman, Billy Sweezy, down on
We
that
all love
bottom.
Billy Sweezy.
Yeah. And man, after what I heard about Ceulemans at this season's NHL prospect tournament up in Traverse City, what a third pair that will be. Billy Sweezy does not mind dropping the gloves,
No,
getting
that is going to
feisty,
be
protecting his
problem.
people. But again, that does not count in Sammy Knazko, Stanislav Svozil, Marcus Bjork. We don't know what the Tim Bernie situation is. And then Ole Julian Bjorkvik-Holm. That doesn't count him in here either. So either I don't even think Columbus even has an ECHL team anymore. So they're going to try to find an ECHL home to them. Or otherwise, there's all these players just sitting.
It's exactly the same problem the Blue Jackets have, which I think is why it's so frustrating, because it's not even like you can send a couple of them up or swap them in and out. The Blue Jackets have, I think, at my last count, if we include Jiricek and Blankenburg, I think they're at 9 defensemen that are at NHL caliber. And there's, I think, 4 or 5 guys fighting for 2 spots. And so that's, 3 or 4 guys or 2 or 3 guys that are going to be sitting in the press box or in Cleveland. And it's going to be a really, really interesting training camp. I think this is the most interested I've been in a training camp, I think, since I started this podcast. And I love training camp. I think it's so much fun. But with the new coach, with all of these lineup decisions to be made, with all of these new faces, Adam Fantilli, who we haven't even talked about because there's no way he's getting sent down. As much as it hurts Deana that she won't be able to cover him in Cleveland. Guys like Dmitry Voronkov are going to be in the mix. There's so many moving parts, and it's really, really exciting, but also trying to do season preview stuff of okay, this is what the lineup is might be. This is who's going to be here. Who's going to be in Cleveland is basically impossible for both Monsters and Blue Jackets writers and media alike.
So one thing to kind of note on Voronkov is his ELC does include a European assignment clause.
Mm-hmm.
So more than likely, I mean, I didn't even consider him in terms of trying to figure out who the players are going to be with the Monsters because of that. So more than likely, if Columbus looks to send him down, that assignment clause may request that kick in. So I would not be surprised. But man, I so selfishly want Fantilli just a game or so. If Columbus has a long week off, please send him to Cleveland, just one game. Because I would love to cover him up in Cleveland, and that would be a real treat for those fans.
Yeah. Look at what he did at Traverse City is just makes me really, really excited. I want to thank you guys again for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked on Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube, and we're also on Sirius XM. We have seen a big bump in numbers as of about Sunday night. I can't imagine why. I don't know what happened on Sunday night, but we appreciate you guys, and thank you for sticking around. It's going to get real exciting here now that the season is getting started. You mentioned, obviously, Trent Vogelhuber earlier. This is going to be his second season as the full-time coach and not essentially the acting head coach.
Correct.
How do you feel about what he's done with this team? Is there anything that kind of what stands out to you about Vogelhuber as an option to kind of bring the Monsters back into playoff contention?
So first of all, what an embarrassment of riches that he has to work with this coming season. I know he is extremely happy about it. He won't say it, but I know he's got that sly smile going on right now. I'm sure he's excited to see which players he ends up getting. One thing that's really important to note, and I'm sure we all remember I almost hate to say the I word leading into this, but we remember the roster issues.
Just going to
Wink,
knock
wink,
on wood
nudge,
real quick.
nudge.
Just to...
Yes, thank you. That both Columbus and Cleveland went through last season. Despite all of that, Trent Vogelhuber had his team within 1 point of a playoff spot. They essentially ran out of time at the end of the season. He was able to get enough synergy and chemistry in that room to win enough games to get to that point. I personally was shocked, especially considering the lineup that he had to ice some time. Again, there were times that Dylan Simpson was second or third line forward, and he is at that point an aging defenseman. It was 11-7 most nights, again, with a defensive player playing forward. I don't know how he managed to do it, but I don't know if it's the former player in the system, just that chemistry that he's able to bring and that knowledge. So he's able to talk to the young players. He's been through it himself. I don't know what it is, but he managed to get that team rallied behind him every single night. And I cannot wait to see what he does especially with Mark Letestu as one of his assistant coaches. Again, people that have been around the Blue Jackets fandom for the last few years know him well. I just cannot wait to see what they do with a full season, with hopefully, fingers crossed, a healthy stability in their lineup.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the storylines that are relevant for the Blue Jackets are going to be relevant for the Monsters, I think, because obviously the Blue Jackets, everyone was injured, literally everyone. And then the guys that didn't get called up from the Monsters, I feel like they had injuries as well to deal with. So they lost all of their guys, and then the guys that they replaced them with were like, well, now we're injured. We're just going to pull everyone out of the ECHL. So, like, poor, it's not Kalamazoo that their affiliate was. I don't remember what their affiliate was. Oh, Toledo, right?
It was Kalamazoo.
It was Kalamazoo. Thank you. I need to brush up on my ECHL teams. Kalamazoo must have had no one by the end of the season because they were all in Cleveland. So hopefully, yeah, like you said, it's if they can stay healthy, knock on wood. Trent Vogelhuber feels like the kind of coach that turns a team into more than the sum of the parts. Except look at the parts he's got to play with this year. It's going to be, I've been saying all off season, watch out for the Monsters. The Monsters are going to be real fun. Let's finish off with a little bit of goalie talk, because we love goalie talk here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Jet Greaves, is he ready to take the Monsters back to the playoffs? Is he a legitimate AHL starting option? I know he kind of got thrown into it, ended up making his NHL debut unexpectedly last season because, again, everyone was injured. I was expecting him to play behind Neil Tarasov for most of the season. Obviously, that didn't happen. Is he ready to be a full-time starter in the AHL?
Well, I will say this. Looking at the team, looking at the options, he is the undisputed starter in Cleveland's net. I mean, assuming that there's no other additions to the Blue Jackets roster in terms of two-way deals, especially. Because Daniil Tarasov, he's up. That's the way it's going to be. The plan last season, the way it looked, that was going to be Tarasov starting in Cleveland, Jet Greaves. It was going to be like a 1A-B situation. But it's whether Jet likes it or not, I'm sure he does like it very much. This is going to be his net. I would not be surprised to see Cleveland, or maybe even Columbus, sign an experienced depth goaltending option.
They need another Brad Thiessen.
That's exactly where I was
Someone,
going.
just an adult to hang around, I do know that I had forgotten about this until literally you just said that. They did sign Aaron Dell to a PTO for
Yes.
training camp, and he feels like the perfect candidate to be that old guy on the Monsters that they can call up and play him in the show if they need to, but he's probably pretty happy just chilling in the AHL, looking after the kids. He was very good for the Barracuda last season, and I hope they sign him because I think that'll add a real. The Monsters have needed a Brad Thiessen for basically since he retired, so it'll be
Yes.
good to have old guy with the Monsters again.
Exactly. I mean, the only other option for the Monsters right now is Pavel Chayon. He's on the last year of his AHL deal. Of course, Jet Greaves last year of his NHL entry-level contract. They need that experienced third guy because not to knock on Chayon, but I would like to have another option available if
And I believe
possible for them.
Nolan Lalonde is he old enough to make the AHL jump now?
Oh,
No,
I
he's
forgot about
only
him.
19. I believe he's still got to do another year in juniors, but he's the other goalie that they had
Yes.
at Traverse City.
Yeah.
But I don't believe he's eligible yet. But he will be an option next season if they need him, and I like his game a fair amount. They've got a guy in Russia, Sergei Ivanov. They've got some pieces, but they're going to take time. So I think like you say, Jet Greaves is going to have to be the guy, whether he likes it or not. But
he has the talent and the poise to do it.
100%.
He proved that last season. And what makes me even more confident about him being number one is that defense. With it being so stacked with so many different options, it's not like it's a thin roster where this is what we have to work with. To start, they have more than enough options to kind of tinker with the pairings and all of that. It should be fine.
Yeah, I'm just looking up Jet Greaves' stats from last season. So last season, he played 43 games for the Monsters, had an .899 save percentage, 2 shutouts, and a record of 19-16-5 with a decimated defense.
Mm-hmm.
So look for Jet Greaves to have an extremely good bounce back season. He had a .905 in 29 games in his rookie season. Like, I'm extremely hopeful for Jet Greaves, and considering I believe he was just a guy that they signed in the aftermath of losing Matisse Kivlenieks because they needed literally any goalie. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was just a guy that they signed because they needed a body, and he has somehow turned into potentially an NHL piece.
That was actually Cam Johnson who fit that bill specifically.
Oh, okay.
Because he was signed and then not, and then the whole thing, I hate to say whole thing, but after Matisse Kivlenieks passed away and the Seattle expansion draft, they had to have that third goalie, so they ended up re-signing Cam Johnson back. With Jet Greaves, it was, again, the big I word up top, really just ran through all the goalies, and they had to sign a goalie to have enough goalies on the bench. So they called up Jet Greaves after signing him to that entry-level contract. So his was a mid-season signing.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
I had mixed up my goalies. I feel like there's been a lot of them going through Columbus and Cleveland over the past couple of years. Hopefully it's a little bit more stable this year. I want to finish off with just one more question. Who do you think is going to be the MVP for the Cleveland Monsters this season?
Oh, that is such a good question. And I honestly don't know how to answer that.
Because the easy option is like Trey Wolansky or David Jiricek, but the hope is that they will be in the NHL. So I'm looking at the roster, like, who do I expect to fill those roles if they're not here, you know?
So if Jet does as well as he did last season with the team that he had in front of him, he could easily do it. However, kind of dark horse for me, Owen Sillinger. He is just a nice glue piece that is a AHL deal, loved in the room, really good with the coaches. He could be a dark horse for MVP in my mind.
Yeah. So, Locked On Blue Jackets listeners, keep your ears out for Owen Sillinger's name. He's probably going to be around a lot. We're going to try and do more frequent Cleveland Monsters check-ins this season because there's going to be so many exciting players there. We'll have Deana back on, obviously, because I always love when Deana's on the show. I feel like I learn more about the Monsters. And why don't you tell all of the wonderful people where they can find you and your work, Deana, because there is somewhere brand new that they can find your work.
Yes. So just launched back in mid-August is ahlnewsnow.com. You can find my work regarding the Cleveland Monsters. You can also find work from the person sitting right next to
This
me,
guy.
Jay. Yeah, where he's covering the Barracuda for us. But you can find all of my tweets and stuff regarding the AHL and the Monsters at Deana Weinheimer. And then you can also follow us on Twitter at AHL News Now and keep an eye out if you love AHL podcasts. We've got one coming for you in mid-October. That's Calder's Calling.
Sneak preview for you guys.
Yes.
So keep your ears out for that. Go check out AHL News Now, especially Deana's work on the Monsters. It's going to be a fun season. Thanks again, Deana, for sitting down with me, talking about all things Monsters. And let's hope for a trip back to the playoffs and potentially a trip back to the Calder Cup.
That would be amazing for the first time. That would be the first time that they've made the playoffs since I started covering the team in the 2019 season. But then again, the whole pandemic stuff. But I would love an opportunity to cover that. So pretty please, Monsters.
We are crossing our fingers here at Locked On Blue Jackets. And
for also, a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And that's all I've got for you today. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking a little bit more about Jarmo Kekalainen and his role in Mike Babcock's hiring and what that means for his future with the Blue Jackets and maybe what it should mean for his future with the Blue Jackets. So that's coming up tomorrow. Thank you for listening today, for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on every podcast app of your choice. We're on YouTube, we're on Sirius XM, and we appreciate you wherever you listen or watch. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find Hayden over at HaydenH971. And thank you once again for listening. Until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.